Hello everyone, and thank you for watching UCA's Center for Writing and Communication Workshop Screencast over APA documentation style. Today we will be covering basic formatting, things like the title page, the abstract, in-text citations, the references page, and more. So let's go ahead and get started. Notice that we're using the 7th edition of APA formatting. APA was updated in October of 2019. Since we are recording this in March of 2020, it is still a fairly new edition. Your professor, therefore, may not be using the 7th edition yet. Maybe they are. Maybe they're still using the 6th. So though this is correct, what we're about to teach you moving forward, be sure to ask your professor. Know your professor's expectations. Know if their formatting with APA differs somehow. So just be in communication with them. But this is the student version of 7th edition because there is a differentiation now between student papers and professional papers. So let's get started. First, you need to know the basics. Times New Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, double spaced. Very straightforward, easy to set your paper with those expectations as soon as you pull up the document, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Now, you can use different font styles. You can use 11-point Georgia, 11-point Arial, or 10-point Computer Modern. But most likely your professor will be used to Times New Roman 12-point font. So I would say a good thing to just kind of have as your foundation, as your default, would just be Times New Roman 12-point font, just to play it safe in case they wouldn't like you using those other font styles. Now for the title page, APA is different perhaps than say like MLA if you're used to writing in MLA because it does have a title page. The title page has at the top right corner the page number in the header, but there is no longer needed. It's no longer required that you have a title in your running head. So I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. If you're writing a student paper, you don't need the running head in your header anymore, which just had the title of your paper. If you're doing a professional paper, then you will still need the running head. I'll show you how to do both just in case. But a student paper does not need that. So a student paper would look like this. That it would just have right here at the top right corner the page number. There's no title here, no running head is necessary. Now right here, if you go down, if you enter down a little bit, is where you will write your title. Your title will be centered. It will be bolded, and all of these main words will be capitalized, kind of like you would expect from any title. Then you have the student name, the department, where you studied, the course name, the professor, and then the date. Now, the next page would have the abstract. Though this is mostly for professionals, maybe your professor still expects you to write an abstract. That would be on the second page of your document. An abstract is just about 150 to 200 word summary about the paper to come. So it's pretty straightforward. Notice that it's all left aligned. You don't have to indent the first line like you would on like when you're doing a normal paragraph, perhaps. It just stays all left aligned. Notice it's short. It's about 150, 200 words, straightforward summary of what is to come. So let's go ahead and look at how to format your paper. So first, I want to make sure to change Times New Roman 12-point font, and I want to make sure that it is double spaced because that's the expectations. Now I'm going to center my title. So I'm going to enter down just a little bit, and then I want to make sure it's bolded. Title goes here. Your title might be long. Your title can be up to 2 lines long, so keep that in mind. Now I'm going to enter down just a little bit, not a whole lot more, and I'm going to write student name. It will be the first name, the middle initial, and the last name. And then department of something, wherever it is that you're studying out of, psychology, English, whatever. And then since we're from the University of Central Arkansas, I'm going to go ahead and put that here. Let me spell Arkansas correctly first. And then say I have my course name, my doctor or professor name, and then the date. The date will be straightforward. It's not like MLA in that you have to have the day and then the month and then the year. You can just have it normal, like you would maybe normally write it, which is month, day, and year. So March 2020, just like that. There may be a little bit extra space in between here. Yeah, that looks about right. Oh no, that's not what I meant to do. I'm sorry, I lost my document. 1 second. There it is. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to insert my page numbers. They are going to all be here in the top right corner. So that was easy enough, easy to add. Now this is like the perfect title page for a student paper. I am going to have to make sure this is Times New Roman 12-point font because I want to make sure that everything is consistent, but this right here is perfect. If you are doing a professional paper, you will still have to have a running head up here. If you have to include that, then just make sure to type in front of this running head, and then it'll be just the title of your paper in all caps. And you have to make sure that it is left aligned. So I'm just going to tab over. That's just the easiest way to get it left aligned for me because I just want it as straightforward as possible. And that is kind of like if you were doing a professional paper or your professor had that expectation because that's what your professor did with the 6th edition. The 6th edition did have running head. And it did have something too. The second page wouldn't include this portion that actually said running head. So you had to click a different first page so that you could have running head on the first page, and then on the second page, you could just have this part and not the running head actually explicitly stated. But considering that that is not part of the expectations for 7th edition student papers, I'm not going to worry about it. But that's just in case you have to add it because your professor expects that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just insert a page break. This is if you're doing an abstract. It will be bolded and centered right there. And then you're going to enter down a line. It won't be bolded. And then you'll just start writing here. Remember, it's completely left aligned. You don't have to indent to get ready to write. I think that this is still Arial and it's bothering me, so I'm going to change it. There we go. Okay, so now everything is in Times New Roman 12-point font. And you have your paper started. This is a perfectly formatted start to an APA style paper. All right, let's continue. Now, the body of your paper. When you do start writing your paper after your abstract, so I'm going to go back to the document actually just so I can show you this. When you start writing your paper, so you're going to have an entire summary here. I'm going to insert another page break because when you start writing your introduction, body, conclusion, all of that, the title goes here again. So you've said your title multiple times, but that's okay. It will be bolded. And then you can actually start typing. Now your introduction does not need a heading because that's what we're talking about here. That's what this is about right here. You do not need to have a heading that says introduction. Every other section of your paper, however, will probably have a heading just because APA is usually used in the sciences. It's very methodical and very organized. And so say I had one section called previous research, one called current research. Now the largest, maybe think of these things kind of like containers. The largest container will have a title that is centered and bolded in the middle of the page. And then all of the things that are within that container, these things right here, will all be left aligned. So for instance, method is the kind of large container, so to speak. It is the largest heading. And then a subheading of method is participants. Subheadings of participants are here. So they are left aligned, but they're flushed left. So you would indent over and italicize them to say they are subheadings of participants. And then you go back to being completely flushed left aligned. And materials is a subheading of method, and procedure is a subheading of method as well. This is just ways to organize your APA style paper because it will probably be expected of you to do it similar to this. Now make sure to use passive voice when you, not to use passive voice, but to use active voice when you're writing academic papers. You want to make sure that your paper sounds very strong, and passive voice sounds like this. Notice what's crossed out down here with this McDonald's example. It is being loved by me is said in passive voice because me, the one who's actually doing the loving, the action, is at the end of the sentence and is not the subject who is actively doing the action. Not to sound redundant, but that's just the way that it is. I'm loving it, however, is active. I, who am the one doing the action, am at the front of the sentence. I am the subject, and then the action verb of love follows right after that. So just make sure to use active voice because it just sounds a lot stronger in your paper. Bias-free language. Bias-free language is just about being specific and being sensitive in your writing. Because this is academic writing, because this is science-based usually, you want to make sure that you are specific and also that you're trying to show that you're not being biased and subjective, but it's still trying to take an objective, I suppose, stance and point of view. So appropriate levels of specificity means to include characteristics that are relevant and leave out characteristics maybe that are not. So if you were writing about cognition, for instance, sexual orientation is probably not necessary to include. But maybe if you were talking about stereotypes, then it would be important to mention. There are also instances where you need to be more specific, like instead of saying the elderly, which is so broad, say 75 to 85, give like an age range. If you're talking about an ethnic group, Asian Americans, for instance, is a very broad term, but Chinese Americans is very specific. Remember, this is often used, I keep saying this, APA is usually very research-based. It's a science-based documentation style, and so specificity is key. So why do we cite? We cite and give credit where credit is due because we want to avoid plagiarism first and foremost. Avoiding plagiarism basically just means that that you recognize someone else's intellectual property. There's something in the United States called intellectual property where basically it's the idea that people can own ideas. So if you have an idea and you publish something about that idea, you own, so to speak, you can own that idea. That's why we have copyright laws and things like that. So if you are using someone else's idea, it's not just their words, it's their idea, then you need to make sure to cite. You need to make sure to give credit where credit is due. So it's about avoiding plagiarism. It's about making sure that your reader can go back and check your information. It's about making sure that you're credible, that people can trust you, that they can fact check you, and that the research that you're presenting is reliable. So in-text citations, they're pretty straightforward and helpful. Notice there are multiple ways to use outside sources. You can quote, paraphrase, or summarize. Paraphrasing and summarizing is using your own words. But notice, if you're using your own words, you still have to cite because it's about that person's idea. It's about what they did, the research they conducted, and you want to give credit where credit is due. So you will use the author year format. Jones is the last name, comma, the year number. And then if you're using a direct quotation, then you just need to make sure to add the page number there at the end. If a page number is not included, no worries. APA lets you use paragraph number as well. So there's a specific way to use that. So here's some just examples that are helpful to look at. In-text examples, author and year must be present. So like we've already mentioned, for works with 3 to 5 authors, list all of their names in the first citation that you use, the first citation you mentioned them, and then all of the subsequent citations, you can just use the first author's name and then follow it by et al. So you don't have to keep repeating all of their names. For works with 6 or more authors, just use the first author's name and then follow it by et al. So here's some examples. Notice Webster and Driscoll 1983 are at the end of this sentence, but down here, skip a couple lines. Webster and Driscoll are actually embedded in the sentence itself. They're the subjects of the sentence, and that's okay. So you can use them at the end of a sentence in an in-text citation, or you can actually put them in the sentence itself. And if you do, then you don't have to have the in-text citation at the end. because that would be redundant. That would be repetitive. If you include it here inside of the sentence, then you've done the necessary work. You've given the author's names and you've given the year, and that's what's most important. So there's 4 basic elements to a references page: the author, the date, the title, and the source. So let's look at an example here. So the references page is similar to, like, if you're used to MLA, it would be a works cited page, for instance. It's just, or like a bibliography, if you're used to that terminology, it's a list of all of the sources you've used. So the authors are right here in green. That would go first. Notice that you also have your date. That's way up here. It's at the top. It's small. It's 2013. That would go next. Then you have your title, and then you have the source. The source is the DOI. It's that tiny little thing down here in blue. I'm sorry, this little thing came up so you can't see it. The DOI is down at the bottom. So references, like everything else, it's centered, it's bolded. Make sure that you add the S on reference, because some people think, oh, it's a reference page, when it's really a references page. So make sure to add the S. That's small, but the small details matter in documentation style. That's kind of the whole point. So it is centered and bolded. It's in alphabetical order by last name, and you use a hanging indent as well. So notice, let's kind of observe some things here. We have the authors. Their last names are all spelled out completely, but their first and middle names are just initials. We have commas in between each author. The ampersand, the and symbol, stands in here for the last, between the first 3 and the last author. You have the year number. It's in parentheses with the period afterwards. And then notice the article name is kind of odd in that there's only capital letter here and capital letter here instead of every single main word, I suppose, being capitalized like you might normally expect. So that's something to keep in mind. Period after that. And then this is the actual name of the journal article, or the journal, academic journal itself. It is italicized, and all of the words here are capitalized. Comma. This is the volume number, or the edition, or something like that. And then this is the page range that you're using. So this is the basic thing for using a journal. This is exactly what we just looked at together and kind of talked through. If you're using an online journal, the only thing that changes is that you add a DOI, which is at the very, very bottom here. It's the last thing that you will include. And a DOI basically is just a digital object identifier. It is the specific code given to published articles. It's usually found on the first page of online articles, but maybe not always. Sometimes it could be elsewhere. But it's just basically where somebody can, if they wanted to find that online journal, they can type that in, they can copy and paste that, and that should take them right where they need to go. Resources that you can use. After using this workshop, you can go to Purdue OWL. You can check us out at UCA-CWC. You can go old school and look at a 7th edition APA like physical copy of a manual. You can go to the library. You can use other reference guides. If you do use Purdue OWL, it's very helpful. Notice you go to, I just Googled Purdue OWL APA, and these are the general APA guidelines. It's so specific. It tells you exactly what you need to look for in the title page. This is all stuff I went over with you and that we did together. But it also gives you examples. So that's super exciting and helpful. And this is the difference between the student paper and the professional paper. Notice that the professional paper has the running head here at the top, and they have an author note. It tells you a little bit about the abstract. And now, of course, if you're needing other things, just go over here to the left-hand side and look for things that you need. In-text citations. What do you do if you have multiple authors for in-text citations? What about my reference list? How do I deal with authors? How do I deal with periodicals or books or other print sources? This is a wealth of information here for you. And then finally, my favorite thing is the APA sample paper, which gives you such helpful information. Not only does it show you what it should look like, but these little boxes here tell you what you need to do and why it's necessary. So it explains it for you as you go. I just wanted to, before we sign off here, mention that if you are needing to write your references page, so say we're doing our references right here, it's bolded, it's centered, it's perfect and ready to go, and you have to do, this does not need to be bolded. If you're doing your last name and then you have the first name and their middle initial here, and then you have the article name goes here with only first letter capitalized. Let me spell that right. And then you have journal article name. That would be italicized, correct? Ooh, I can't forget my year number. Let's say it's 2020. And then say I have my edition and then my page numbers, 85 to 98. Okay, so what I wanted to show you with this is just how really quickly how to do a hanging indent, because that's an expectation that you have. Just go to indentation options. I went to format, align and indent, indentation options. I click hanging and apply. And there you go. There is how to format your references page. Finally, if you need to contact us, please come see us at Wynn Thompson 109. You can call us at 501-450-5123. And finally, you can reach us through email at cwc@uca.edu. I appreciate you for watching this presentation. I hope that it was helpful and helps you to write the best APA style paper that you've ever written. Have a great day.